The question of the day is what goes in your bag and how do you determine what goes in the bag itself? Do you want premium ad-free content? Duh. Content that's not censored by big tech, of course. Well, with SD Insider, you can get behind the scenes and a whole lot more. Link in the description. In my bug out class that I teach, we have an interactive exercise where the class itself will put together a bag. So this bag right here is actually a product of that interactive exercise. What I do first is I have a module that explains how to build a bag, and then there is a practical just after that where the entire class gets together. Now what I do is I lay out a bunch of tarps on the ground that's just full of a bunch of gear where they have a lot of different choices. For example, in the shelter part of it, they have a choice of do they want a tent, do they want a tarp, do they want a poncho, do they want a cloak, etc. Now this bag is a result of that exercise, and I thought I would share it with you today so that we can open it up, take a look at the contents, and then you can grade how the class itself did. Now you need to understand there were a few parameters set before they started this exercise. For example, this builds off of your EDC. The bag itself is just a force multiplier for what you should already be carrying. Now before you actually put a bag together, there's a lot of things that you need to consider, and I don't think that there is a perfect kit out there. There's definitely pros and cons to every single approach. And the thing that you need to know the most is what goes in the bag needs to be adequate gear that you actually know how to use. It definitely needs to be inversely proportionate to your skill set. Now, before you even begin, understand that everything is based on situation and environment. And there are many considerations associated with that. Are you in a permissive versus a non-permissive environment? In your plan, are you going to be moving or are you going to be stationary? One of the things that I encourage the class to understand is that you should never carry more than 20% of your total weight. It should also not exceed the total weight of the person who weighs the least in your group. What if somebody gets hurt and somebody else actually has to carry that pack? In search and rescue, that was something that happened all the time. People get injured and we have to carry their gear out for them. You may be a tough guy or a tough woman. Could your children carry the bag though if one of y'all goes down? Now in this class, the person with the lowest weight was 140 pounds. If you do the math, that means that they shouldn't have anything over 28 pounds to carry. It should also be noted that 28 pounds also includes your clothing, your weapon, anything in your EDC, etc. Now that may seem hard to achieve. And to a lot of people, that's a daunting task because they're not willing to give up some of their creature comforts. But the idea of a bug out bag is to be light, fast, and mobile. The things for me that I carry inside of my pack, they're generally the hardest things to recreate in nature. Just because you can recreate something in nature doesn't necessarily mean that you should recreate something in nature. There's a lot to be said about being tactically efficient. Morris Kahansky used to say that the less you know, the more you have to carry, and vice versa. But I would say the more that you have to carry, the more you have to keep up with. And also the quality of the gear that you carry is going to suffer as well. I would rather have a few items that are high quality that I know will work when I need them to work. Instead of just throwing a bunch of stuff in there to meet my priorities of survival, I just can't get on board with that train of thinking. Now, before you start throwing a bunch of stuff into your pack, first you need to understand what your survival priorities are. There's defense, positive mental attitude, shelter, water, fire, and food. You also have to consider things like first aid, signaling, and even rest. And then something that you should do at the very beginning is you should try to separate need from want. One thing that I caution students about is you got to be careful when you have multifunction items as well. A lot of people carry a poncho, for example, so they can cover up their fire supplies, so they have something to sit on, so they have a ground cloth, so they have a shelter, so that they have rain gear, etc. But what if you're using the poncho for one of those things and you need it for something else? So it's always a good idea to remember that when you're packing your bag. Something else to think about is, are the items that you've chosen, is the bag itself going to make you a potential target? Is it going to really stand out, or is it going to just kind of help you blend into your environment? Gray man is also something that you need to think about when you're building a bag. Another thing you need to think about is redundancy. What if you lose one of the most important components in your bag, like say your ferro rod? Do you have a lighter to go with it just in case so you can take care of lighting a fire? And also, if it's super important, you might think about having a lanyard so that you can attach that item to you so you don't lose it. Another thing you need to think about is possum mentality. Do you have the ability to gather resources when you're on the run? Think about MacGyver. Do you have the ability to pick things up you might need later? Having something to barter in the field is stuff that people just don't think about very often. Be cigarettes or alcohol, ammo, or even cash might actually help you out in a pinch. Once you get everything in your pack, it's also important to ask yourself, okay, how am I protecting the gear that I've actually put inside the pack itself? Now, the way I look at this is there's no such thing as the perfect pack. There's definitely pros and cons associated with it, but I think right now we're just gonna dive into the pack and we're gonna see how this class did. Now understand that what we just went over, that's not everything. I can't exactly teach you a 4-hour class in just a few minutes. It's highly likely that you probably have some special needs. For example, if you're a female, you probably have special needs. If you're a diabetic, you're probably going to have medical needs as well. There are a lot of people out there that have special dietary needs too. So that's not all inclusive. That's just some of the guidelines and some of the highlights of stuff that I wanted to share with you, maybe things that you hadn't potentially thought about yet. Now, right off the bat, they chose a Hill People gear bag. They had a range from military bags all the way down to a JanSport, and they chose something right in the middle, and I think they made a pretty good choice. I also want to point out the fact that the bag itself only weighs 25 pounds, so they did a really good job staying in their weight requirement. Now, the only thing on the outside of the pack that's visible is the actual ground pad itself. They could have chosen a blow-up model, they could have chosen a full-size military model, but they went with this one that I modified in a previous video, and I'm really proud of the choice that they made. This one actually covers their core. It's not big and bulky, it's lightweight, and it'll do the job. So good for them on the very first choice. So let's dive in and see what they chose. Now, like I said, they had several choices of things to carry. The very first thing that they chose was food. I don't typically carry a lot of food in my pack, but I'm used to running exercises where I can go, 2 or 3 days without eating. But those people were not willing to give up food whatsoever. Now, they had their choice of Mountain House and Peak Fuel and MREs, etc., but they actually did make a pretty good choice. They chose to go with Nutrient Survival. Went with a choice where they knew that it wasn't going to have empty calories, so they knew that they were going to be using every single thing inside of these kits. I'm actually pretty proud of them because they could have chosen to have, say, 3 or more days worth of food, but they realized the amount of nutrition in Nutrient Survival was better than any of the other stuff they could get out there. So good on them for choosing this. Now, the next thing they chose is this for their defense. This is a CZ P10C. There's no other modifications to it other than the sights. And I think the reason that they chose it is just because they were more comfortable handling a 9mm versus, say, a 10mm, or even some of the rifles that I had out there for them. They also had multiple options with this method of carry. Now they can conceal the weapon, or they can carry it strong side and separate the mag from the holster itself. Now, myself personally, I always tell people carry the biggest stick that you can carry. I carry a 10mm, but in this case, I think they were just more comfortable having a 9. Next item that they chose is a multifunctional shemagh, hundreds of uses, good choice on their part. I like the fact that they chose an orange one because they had several different colors that they could pick from because they knew they might have to potentially signal with it as well. A lot of times students don't think about that, so they did a good job there. Now, here's something I think everybody thinks about, and that's just having extra socks. I think that that's just something that's programmed in our brains. You got to take care of your feet. The last thing that you want is jungle rot when you're out moving. Sucks. Now, this right here is my IFAK. Inside of it, I have stuff to stop the bleed, like I have a tourniquet in here, for example. I also have very specific medications that are life-saving that I have in here. I thought it was smart of them to go ahead and pick some kind of IFAK. This is the one they chose. I think they did a good job. Another multifunction item that they chose is this 6mm plastic bag. I mean, there's just so many uses for one of these. In their case, they told me that this would serve as their ground cloth. But there's lots of other things that you can do with it. Having something like this, that was a smart choice. Something that's often overlooked is a high quality compass, and you'll notice that this one is on a lanyard because they realize this is a precision instrument, that it's really important and something you definitely don't want to lose. Another consideration is what time of year is it? Here it's winter, and they wanted to have an additional layer, so they went with this lightweight puffy jacket. And this is what I've been carrying lately, so I can't fault them for that. They had lots of choices when it comes to water, but they went with this tried, true, proven method here. The Grail, the pre-filter, the stainless steel single wall canteen cup. Here's something that I found really funny. They actually cut open an MRE so they could get the spoon. I don't typically worry about a spoon because it's something that you can just bushcraft out really fast, but something you need to consider is, do you have the skill to do that? In their case, they were not willing to not have a spoon, so they cut it out and put it with this kit. I think I may just leave it there with it just because I thought it was funny. Something that impressed me was they took the lid that goes to the stainless steel cup and they put it inside of the solo stove to nest in there. And I think I'm going to continue to carry the solo stove just like this because it works so well. I've said it 100 times over, having a solo stove is definitely a force multiplier. It gives you the ability to have a contained fire where you don't have to dig a Dakota fire pit. It's nice because you can actually heat up your shelter and you can boil your water and cook your food. I think this is literally one of the smartest components that they put into this kit. This is one of those things that has proven to me to be so useful that I definitely have it in my bag. And I would strongly suggest that you get one. Now this is something that shocked me a little bit. They actually chose to put the Yuko candle inside of the pack. A few of the members of the class, they watch me on several different channels and they had seen my video on using the Yuko candle to make a Palmer furnace. Staying warm was really important to them, and being that it is winter, I just can't argue with them. Plus, they have a candle. That's a backup, redundant backup to the flashlight. So they can light their way, they can heat up their shelter, and they also have a way of extending a fire source. If they needed to carry fire from one place to the next, they have it. It would help out if you had wet tinder, etc. So this is what they chose. Now we all know that your knife is a really important tool, and in this case they chose to go with the Bob. It's the Fieldcraft knife by Tops. Excellent choice. This one has a bow drill divot in it. It has all of the properties and qualities that you need in a true survival knife. And instead of using the ferrocerium and magnesium that comes with it, they chose to use the Exotac ferro rod that has tinder in the handle itself. It also has shock cord, which, in case you don't know, is flammable. So it acts kind of like a candle when you need it to. That was a really good choice on their part. This isn't the actual blade that I carry, but this was a solid choice. Now, one of my favorite pieces of kit is this big boy by Silky. I probably stressed it enough that they thought, yeah, we need to put that into the kit because he likes it so much. I've included this Ranger band in it so it keeps the blade from coming loose when it's in your pack so it doesn't cut anything up. And Ranger bands are useful for a number of reasons. They're also really good fire starters. Plus, with it being winter, having one of these is the bomb when you're trying to cut firewood. You can also use the spine to sharpen your knife to act as a steel. You can also use it for processing tinder, etc. Overall, really good choice. I was really proud of them for picking this one. They all wanted a flashlight, so they chose to go with a Streamlight, and that's what I carry every single day, so I couldn't fault them for that. They also chose to go with just a standard Bic lighter that has a Ranger band and then Gorilla Tape. One thing that I was really proud of them for is they actually checked the lighter. Something that I do to trip them up is I will put faulty gear inside of their choices to see if they actually check it before they put it in the bag. One of the females that was there, she actually checked the lighter, so I'm proud of her. She did a good job there. That's a win for the team. Another tool that they chose was a multi-tool. Really can't argue with that. Oh yeah, something I forgot. This was really important to them. They pulled this out of the MRE because they did not want to not have sugar and creamer for their coffee. When I asked them about it, they said, hey, this helps with a positive mental attitude, a little taste of home, and I couldn't argue with that. Not to mention there is some other stuff that, you know, is quite useful in here, but I gotta say, this isn't something I typically have. Something that I stressed in the class was sheltering the ability to thermoregulate. So in addition to the puffy and the extra socks and the shemagh, they chose a jungle bag by Snugback. Definitely couldn't argue with them. They had lots of choices. I mean, this is what I actually carry, so yeah, good job. Now, I thought this was interesting. I talked to them about having personal flotation devices in case they had to. Could they do it? So they chose to go with this dry bag. I also found that it was interesting because inside they actually put their sheltering option. Now, I personally wouldn't have done this because I would have used the dry sack to go with the other components in the kit that I just don't want to get wet. When I asked them about it, they said, well, what if your shelter itself gets wet? Do you have something to put it in? And of course, my response to them was, well, you could always carry this on the outside of the pack. And my response to them was, well, you could carry this on the outside of the pack. I think that it's more important that you keep everything else that you need to keep dry. Now, like I said, they had the choice of a tarp, a tent, a poncho, and I was shocked. They actually chose this cloak. Now, this is the Tactic Cloak. I just did a video on it, but it kind of... Now, this is the Tactic Cloak. I just did a video on it. I was actually kind of surprised they chose it, but, you know, hey, money was no object when they were putting this kit together. Now, to go along with the shelter, they actually chose this kit, which has stakes in it and pre-rigged lines as well. It also has some extra cordage. If I remember right, there's 25 feet of 550 paracord in here as well. And that's really, and I was really proud of them because being tactically efficient is really important. The ability to put up a shelter in at least under 5 minutes is really important. When I was in the field, we had to shelter in under a minute. But in any case, I was really proud of them for choosing pre-rigged lines so that they could put up a shelter really fast. All right, so there's what they chose to put in this kit. There were a lot of other things that they could have chosen, but they didn't. Like I had GPS, a ham radio, night vision. I also had maps of the area and map tools and stuff to write on. But in the end, this is what 20 people who had to compromise chose to put together. Now, my question to you is, I have a survival challenge that's coming up here pretty quick with Jason. So y'all get in the comments section and let me know, should I choose to run this kit in a survival challenge? And if I choose this kit, what should I take away or what should I add to the kit? It's not exactly what I would carry, but I would have no problem carrying this kit whatsoever. Something you need to consider is it's difficult for 20 people to actually compromise and come to an agreement with this kit. It's interesting because you see leaders emerge out of this exercise. And it's not always the bully or the person that speaks up first. Along the way, there were compromises, but eventually I think they came up with a pretty decent kit. Now, this isn't exactly what I would carry. What I'm kind of interested in is, y'all been watching the channel for a while. Y'all jump into the comment section and let me know what's missing out of this kit. Hey, if you enjoyed the video, like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell. And until next time, kill those fires. Can't get away from it.